Hello and welcome, distinguished guests, speakers, and to all our viewers on Facebook Live and on Zoom to day one of the fourth SEAMEO SPAFA International Conference on Southeast Asian Archaeology and Fine Arts, or otherwise known as SPAFACON 2021. SPAFACON 2021 is a 5-day online conference running from today until Friday, the 17th of December. To our SPAFACON 2021 audience on Facebook and on Zoom, thank you for joining us, and we love to hear from you. Please let us know where you are joining us from, and if you have questions for our speakers later on during their presentations and in the panel discussion, please leave your questions in the Facebook comment section, or if you're joining us on Zoom, please leave your questions in the Q&A chat box. The SEAMEO Regional Center for Archaeology and Fine Arts, otherwise known as SPAFA, has been celebrating its Golden Jubilee this past year, so we will be choosing winners from the questions you post to win a SPAFA 50th anniversary souvenir. Before we begin with our distinguished panelists' presentations and speeches, please join me in welcoming SEAMEO SPAFA's Center Director, Mrs. Somlak Charenput, to give her welcome remarks for SPAFACON 2021.
Your Excellency, Madam Minister of Education, represented by Dr. Suphat Champathong, Permanent Secretary for Education. Your Excellency, Mr. Itthiphol Kunplome, Minister of Education. Mr. Jeremy Barnes, Chairman of SEAMEO SPAFA Governing Board and Director General of National Museum of the Philippines. Mr. Kittiphan Pansuwan, Director General of the Thai Fine Arts Department, representing Governing Board Member for Thailand. Respected speakers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the SEAMEO Regional Center for Archaeology and Fine Arts, let me express that it is a great honor to have Your Excellencies, the Ministers of Education and Culture, with us to declare the opening of the fourth SPAFA International Conference, or SPAFACON 2021 event. Similarly, we are honored to have the Chairman of SEAMEO SPAFA Governing Board and the Director General of the Fine Arts Department, representing Governing Board Member for Thailand, to deliver their welcome addresses today. SPAFACON is a conference series that SEAMEO SPAFA has been holding since launching it in 2013. The center continually organized it every 3 years to encourage local scholars in archaeology to come together and share knowledge and experiences. This year, however, to coincide with our 50th anniversary celebration of promoting and contributing to archaeology and fine arts in Southeast Asia, we arranged for the conference to be organized in 2021 instead of 2022. In this special program, we will be celebrating the Southeast Asia archaeology and fine arts in the region of Southeast Asia among scholars, researchers, professionals, students, and interested individuals. SEAMEO SPAFA has a long history of interaction and cooperation with practitioners in both domains. Due to the disruptions caused by the pandemic, SPAFACON 2021 is for the first time held online. We took this disadvantage and made it into a possible advantage by developing a more efficient way of learning in the future. It should enable us to achieve our sustainable goals faster and probably more inclusive than expected. Instead of focusing on archaeology, SEAMEO SPAFA expanded to the fields under our mandate, which are heritage conservation, visual art, performing arts, and museum studies into this conference. The program will begin with a keynote panel discussion on archaeology and cultural heritage in the time of reopening after this ceremony. From tomorrow, 34 papers will be presented over the course of 4 days until December 17. With the appreciation and value of cultural heritage in Southeast Asia being transmitted through education, SEAMEO SPAFA strongly believes that we can be part of the effort to build valuable global citizenship in enhancing sustainable developments. Thank you and welcome to all of you, esteemed guests, respected speakers, participants, and those who join us in this fourth SEAMEO SPAFA International Conference or SPAFACON 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Center Director, Mrs. Somlak Charanput, for your welcome remarks. And now please join me in welcoming the Director General of the Fine Arts Department and SEAMEO SPAFA Governing Board for Thailand, Mr. Kittiphan Pansuwan, for his opening address for SPAFACON 2021.
Her Excellency Minister of Education Thailand, Ms. Treenuch Thienthong, His Excellency Minister of Culture Thailand, Mr. Itthiphol Kunplome, Director General of National Museum of the Philippines, and Chair of the SEAMEO SPAFA Governing Board, Mr. Jamie Barnes, Center Director of SEAMEO SPAFA, Mrs. Somlak Charanput, distinguished speakers and participants. It is a great pleasure for me to be here in the SPAFACON 2021 on behalf of Thailand's SEAMEO SPAFA Governing Board member and the Director General of the Fine Art Department. I would like to welcome all of you to SPAFACON 2021. The Fine Art Department, as the main agency in charge of preserving cultural heritage and art of the nation, has been cooperating with the SPAFA SEAMEO Center in various cultural fields through training workshops, seminars, and related cultural events. It is unable to deny that the sustainability of a cultural is dependent on a number of factors. One of them is to promote research studies and to provide a forum for stakeholders at all levels to exchange ideas and disseminate research findings. In Southeast Asia, there are few and far between forums that focus on archaeology, arts, and culture. As a result, not only does this conference represent another significant step forward in promoting Southeast Asia's cultural science, fine arts, museum, and archaeology, but it also disseminates cutting-edge research in these fields. This demonstrates SEAMEO SPAFA's unwavering commitment to building capacity and network to protect and safeguard the world's cultural heritage. So I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to SEAMEO SPAFA Center for hosting this virtual international conference. Finally, I would like to express my sincere hope that this conference will be a success, laying the important cornerstone for the region's sustainable development of cultural heritage promotion and preservation. Thank you. ขอบคุณมากครับ
Thank you, Mr. Kittiphan Pansuwan, for your opening address for SPAFACON 2021. Please join me now in welcoming the Director General of the National Museum of the Philippines and SEAMEO SPAFA Governing Board Chairperson, Mr. Jeremy Barnes to give an opening address for SPAFACON 2021.
To our dear officials of the Royal Thai Government, the Honorable Minister of Education, Ms. Treenuch Thienthong, the Honorable Minister of Culture, Mr. Itthiphol Kunplome, the Honorable Director General of the Fine Arts Department, and my esteemed colleague on the Governing Board of SEAMEO SPAFA, Mr. Kittiphan Pansuwan, to our beloved Center Director of SEAMEO SPAFA, Ms. Somlak Charoenpot, and her entire team, particularly on the occasion of this conference, to Dr. Noel Hidalgo-Tan, Senior Specialist for Archaeology. To all other esteemed officials, especially of SEAMEO and its member and associate nations and stakeholders, to our distinguished colleagues and all our participating scholars and researchers in the field of archaeology, fine arts, and other allied areas of investigation, and indeed to all our dear friends. It is my great honor and deep pleasure as the representative of the Philippines and as the present chairman of the governing board of SEAMEO SPAFA, and of course as the Director General of the National Museum of the Philippines, which we work hard to maintain and further develop as a leading center for archaeology in my country and the Southeast Asian region, to add my welcome to everybody today to SPAFACON 2021, the 4th SEAMEO SPAFA International Conference on Southeast Asian Archaeology and Fine Arts, which, very significantly for the organization of SEAMEO SPAFA, is taking place on its 50th year as an institution which we all know was established and which continues to exist to promote archaeology and fine arts in our region of Southeast Asia. As many of you will know, particularly those who participated in the first SPAFACON in 2013, and then in the second and third conferences in 2016 and 2019, like I myself have, this conference serves as a vital venue for the gathering, networking, sharing, and exchange of archaeologists and scholars and specialists in allied fields, together with their research and studies pertaining to our region and its vast range of areas of investigation. But for this 4th SPAFACON, the scope of the conference has been expanded still further to include the full scope of SEAMEO SPAFA's institutional coverage, including arts, intangible heritage, and other fields such as those relating to performing arts, visual arts, and museum studies. Needless to say, this expansion of scope will enlarge the SPAFACON network and community of scholars and enrich even further the proceedings and facilitate yet larger opportunity for valuable research to be shared and disseminated for the benefit, of course, of all of us. And for this, I, on behalf of its governing board, commend SPAFA and its consistent and untiring effort to bring this and all of us together and keep bringing us together even as we remain in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. The 3rd SPAFACON in 2019 in Bangkok, where many of us were together physically with all the exhilaration and sense of occasion such encounters bring, seems like a long while ago and belonging to a different era already. And so I would like to convey appreciation to all who are supporting this online version in ways that we have all learned is the best, but far from ideal way we can continue to work under such regrettable circumstances. Indeed, let's all take a moment to remember our dear colleagues, friends, and family who have not been able to make it through this global crisis and who have passed away. I know that we have all been harmed by the pandemic, not least through the loss of loved ones and esteemed colleagues. So let's now just send a prayer or express a hope that through the mercies of the divine, they are enjoying their eternal spiritual rest and that their souls can indeed rest well in the knowledge that they will not be forgotten as we continue to love or otherwise remember them. The war against the virus continues, and we must all continue to be vigilant, diligent, and resilient. Please all take care to stay safe and make safe the people around each of us. Indeed, nobody is safe unless all of us are safe. So please get vaccinated if you aren't already, and get boosted if you are, once you have the chance. And please follow strictly the guidelines, always prescribed by our respective health authorities. We will at some point triumph over COVID-19 and then be able to physically be together and interact again. And conferences such as this will revert to their traditional form of us actually being together in one place as one community and network for a specified period of time that is designed to be a special, memorable, lasting, and invaluable experience for all concerned. Until that happens, I hope that everyone will, despite the online format that is, as I expect all of us have come to learn, really often rather wearying and in many instances without much spirit, I hope that we'll try to contribute to establishing that special vibe, energy, and exhilaration which I know animated previous SPAFACONs, and overcome the limitations of being at one and the same time together but apart. With that, we can, in this conference, look forward excitedly to 34 papers to be presented over the course of 5 days with an audience of, so far, more than 200 persons. My appreciation goes out to the presenters and once again to the organizers and the SEAMEO SPAFA team. I wish the 4th SPAFACON every success and take this opportunity on behalf of the governing board of SEAMEO SPAFA to thank everyone present today and over the next succeeding days of the conference this week, and to affirm our deep commitment to supporting the archaeological and fine arts community and network of scholars, artists, practitioners, culture bearers, and all stakeholders in these fields in and concerning Southeast Asia as we move forward into the next 50 years of SEAMEO SPAFA. With that, thank you very much. Maraming salamat po. Khop khun mak krap.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy Barnes, for your opening address. SPAFA's work deals with archaeology, fine arts, and culture of Southeast Asia. So to give a keynote address on culture for SPAFACON 2021, we are very honored to have the Minister of Culture of Thailand. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency, Mr. Itthiphol Kunplome, for his keynote address on culture for SPAFACON 2021.
Your Excellency, Minister of Education, Ms. Treenuch Thienthong, Director General of the Fine Art Department, Mr. Kittiphan Pansuwan, Governing Board Member for Thailand, Center Director of SEAMEO SPAFA, Mrs. Somlak Charanpot, Director General of the National Museum of the Philippines and SEAMEO SPAFA Governing Board Chairperson, Mr. Jeremy Barnes, Distinguished Speaker, guest participants, ladies and gentlemen. This is a great honor for me to be here today on the occasion for the 4th SEAMEO SPAFA International Conference in Southeast Asia, Archaeology and Fine Arts. The Ministry of Culture and SEAMEO SPAFA have a long working relationship through the Fine Arts Department. Archaeology, art, and culture are inextricably linked with each other in development of human society, and it is in this interconnectedness that we can understand them better. The people of Southeast Asia have inherited a long tradition of preserving their cultural heritage throughout the past few thousand years, with archaeological sites dating back to prehistoric times. Many of our cultural practices are shared with the other Southeast Asian countries and across modern boundaries. It is important that we give attention to preservation of each other's culture in Southeast Asia. It is also important for people to learn about the different heritage sites that exist. In this way, we can keep the value of heritage sites alive. Occasions like this give us an opportunity to share at the latest research in archaeology, art, and culture in the regions. And I am sure that all those who take part in the exchanges will benefit from their involvement. We wish you all a successful conference, and I extend my gratitude for this occasion to SEAMEO SPAFA on behalf of all those at the Ministry of Culture and the other related government agencies We sincerely thank you for your time and support in developing our heritage project. My warmest welcome to all of you joining near and far. That academic level of research presented by all those present today will surely promote regional cooperation as well as further mutual understanding among different cultures in Southeast Asia. I believe that this conference is one of our driving forces towards the promotion of archaeology, art, and culture in the region. Last but not least, I look forward to the enhancement of cooperation in the field of archaeology and heritages onward. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Itthiphol Kunplome, for your opening address on culture for the conference. SPAFA is under the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, or SEAMEO, and is hosted by the Ministry of Education of Thailand. To give a keynote address on education for SPAFACON 2021, please join me in welcoming Dr. Suphat Champathong, Permanent Secretary for Education on behalf of the Minister of Education of Thailand, Her Excellency Ms. Treenuch Thienthong, Minister of Education of Thailand.
Mr. Itthiphol Kunplome, Your Excellencies, Minister of Culture, Thailand. Mr. Jeremy Barnes, Director General of the National Museum of the Philippines and SEAMEO SPAFA Governing Board Chairperson. Mr. Kittiphan Pansuwan, Director General of the Fine Art Department, SEAMEO SPAFA Governing Board Member for Thailand. Ms. Somlak Jareunpot, Center Director, SEAMEO SPAFA. Respect speakers and distinguished guests from around the world. On behalf of the Minister of Education of Thailand, it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome you to the 4th SEAMEO SPAFA International Conference on Southeast Asia Archaeology, which has now also expanded to the fine arts. The Ministry of Education of Thailand and the Southeast Asian Minister of Education Organization would like to congratulate SEAMEO SPAFA for organizing this conference. During this challenging situation of the pandemic, the education sector in Thailand and around the world has been forced to adapt by adopting online formats for many of our programs. It is thus heartening to see that SEAMEO SPAFA, as the key institution, also continue to disseminate the knowledge about archaeology, art, and culture in Southeast Asia to students and professionals in the same way too. Education and culture are the building blocks that enable a nation to maintain its identity and have always been at the heart of the great civilizations of Southeast Asia. There are also integral components in addressing our common global challenges, such as climate change, sustainable development, and material prosperity. It is therefore also imperative that many nations gathered here present their research on topics that highlight our diverse peoples, cultures, and civilizations, but also have regional and global relevance. I hope that the new knowledge shared during this conference will be the basis for future education and training program for students and researchers in the field of archaeology and arts. In closing, I would like to thank all the participating nations for making this conference a resounding success. I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate SEAMEO SPAFA on their continued endeavor to promote knowledge about Southeast Asia and for their 50th anniversary. The Ministry of Education of Thailand will continue its support for SEAMEO SPAFA in its quest for excellence through education. With this remark, I am pleased to declare the SEAMEO SPAFA International Conference on Southeast Asian Archaeology and Fine Art open. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suphat Champathong, for your keynote address on education and for officially opening the conference. So, ladies and gentlemen, SPAFACON 2021 is officially open, and we will now proceed to the keynote panel discussion, where we have a lineup of distinguished guests to discuss archaeology and cultural heritage in the time of reopening. The moderator for this keynote panel discussion is none other than SEAMEO SPAFA's Senior Specialist in Archaeology. Please join me in welcoming the moderator for the keynote panel discussion, Dr. Noel Tan.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Sawadee from Bangkok. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to SPAFACON 2021. It has been a while since we last met in person, and it might be a little more while before we meet again. This morning, we will start SPAFACON with a discussion. This morning, we will start SPAFACON with a discussion panel rather than a series of keynote speeches. And we have with us a series of distinguished guests who will come to talk to us. Now, when we organized SPAFACON, we were in the midst of the pandemic. Many of us are unable to meet in person. Many of us are unable to have in-person events. And so it is quite fitting that we have, at this time where vaccines are now becoming more available and it looks like we are, international travel is starting to resume and we might be in the cusp of reopening, that this will be the theme of our opening panel, Archaeology and Cultural Heritage in the Time of Reopening. And on that note, we have a series of panelists this morning who will come to share with us their thoughts about what this time of reopening and what this time of pandemic has meant for our different sectors in archaeology and cultural heritage. Let me introduce our speakers for this morning. We have from UNESCO Bangkok, Ms. Dong Bik Ham. She is an anthropologist and the chief of the culture unit at UNESCO Bangkok. She coordinates a number of projects in Asia and the Pacific, particularly around the Mekong countries. For our second speaker this morning, we have Mr. Chai Visot, who is the director of the National Museum of Cambodia. And he's speaking with a special anniversary in mind. Speaking of anniversaries, the National Museum of Cambodia celebrated their 100th anniversary last year in 2020. And this year they're celebrating the 101st. He is joining us this morning with his assistant, Mr. Mong Chanraksme. Our third panelist should need little introduction, Professor Rasmi Shukhongdet. is from the Department of Archaeology at SPAFACON University in Thailand. She is known to many of us. She has a long-running project in Mae Hong Son province in northern Thailand. And she's also the president of the Indo-Pacific Prehistory Congress, which is a major archaeology conference that will happen next year in 2022 in Chiang Mai. And last but not least, especially so because she is my boss, is Mrs. Somnak Charanput, the Center Director of SEAMEO SPAFA. She was formerly of the Fine Arts Department and has a museums background as well. And she is a very dear, beloved leader to all of us. So without much further ado, this is going to be a very casual discussion panel. What I've invited all our panelists is to speak on 10 minutes on the theme of archaeology and cultural heritage in the time of reopening from the perspective of their institution. And so each speaker will have about 10 minutes to speak, and then we will go into a discussion from there. Please feel free to put your questions in the, if you're on Zoom, please put your questions in the Q&A box and I'll moderate the questions from there. If you're joining us from Facebook, please put your questions in the comments and please make sure to leave your name and affiliation so that we can ask the questions to our panelists from there. So for our first speaker, may I ask Ms. Han to present her thoughts. Ms. Han, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Noel, and a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all colleagues who are online with us today. It is a great honor to be invited to join this distinguished panel, and also it's a little nervous to be the first one to open the floor. So I work at UNESCO, and in UNESCO, we cover many different aspects under culture. We work with world heritage, living heritage, heritage on the ground, underwater, and many forms of creative expressions that we often refer to as cultural and creative industries. So as we are in the process of opening up, we are starting a new normal. We probably could think back to the time before COVID, and we could think about how there are many of the challenges that COVID made more visible during the past 2 years. In fact, was something that happened previously as well. So as you see, the culture sector has faced many damage and risks proposed by natural disasters and climate change, wars and conflicts. There are many culturally inappropriate development, often in the name of development, but often at the disadvantage of cultural heritage. We have seen many demographic changes of people moving into urban areas that creating many of the disruption in the practices of cultural heritage. In terms of inequality, we also acknowledge many inequality between rural and urban areas, between different groups of population, between different countries. And then last but not least, culture and the arts often receive quite low priority in the national agendas, which means the culture sector has very little budget. So the COVID started and it creates more problems. Over the past few years, past 18 months, UNESCO has reviewed, has monitored the situation of the COVID impacts. It came out through the form of the trackers that had been published every month or every other month. And also around last summer, we published a series of reports on the different impacts of culture, impacts of COVID on different aspects of culture. So they're just here are just some very key, very basic information that many people have probably very well aware. We see that 71% of sites have been closed. Some have been closed up to half a year. There's 50% of average drop in entry fees, which to the World Heritage sites, which is the key budget revenue for many of the sites. And 78% of the communities around the World Heritage Site have also faced the impacts, largely because of the decrease in tourists who come in the countries. In terms of intangible living heritage, we have many communities have also reported that how the COVID has disrupted their practices. And we see museums are closing. We see a big decrease in the creative sector, for example, on the movie theater close, causing 72% loss in the global film industry revenue, or 64% decrease in the global music revenue. So the impact is very large. Many people face a loss of revenues and income. Many of the cultural sector workers are working as informal and independent workers. So they did not benefit from any of the subsidy or social insurance that many other workers benefit from. There are further risks of culture and heritage. So many places are closed. The unauthorized construction continues to work. There's no ability to monitor the sites. So as you see in the terms of archaeology, I'm sure that you have heard many cases where illicit trafficking has increased as part of this closure. There's also a widening of gap inequalities. It had existed before, but now we see even more inequality between global north and global south, between giant distribution platforms for different forms of culture and the arts and the producer. The digital devices are very unequally accessible, and also the gaps in public support and insufficient private sector investment. We see a great intensification of the use of digital technology, which could become a great opportunity now for us to further explore and to work upon. And like the conference that we had today is all online, but we probably would not even thought about that before COVID time. But again, when it brings opportunity, we also need to think about the issues of ethical issues in terms of digital transformation, as well as the gap. One of the opportunities that we see that is really becoming very visible is we see the more visible role for culture as a source for well-being and development. So we see at the individual level, many people resort to arts and culture to deal with the stress, to deal with the depression caused by the COVID pandemic. And at the global level, we also saw culture became a major part of agenda of different ministers meeting, and the most notably the recent meeting of G20 ministers. Culture became one of the stronger commitment that the ministers are willing to take. So now, as we are in the process of opening, what can be done to meet on this new challenge, to manage the crisis, to improve the resilience, sustainability, justice, and well-being at the using the resources of cultural resources, and at the same time we can contribute to safeguard heritage and to promote creativity. And here we would just like to offer some of the very simple, but to implement that, I would imagine that would take a lot of concerted efforts across the partner. So for the immediate response, we hope that there could be some emergency package and subsidies to be put together for the sector. Maybe some has done so, but then it could be increased. There is also a strong need to include the culture sector in the national recovery plans. And in forward-looking, there would be an importance to stronger prepare for the culture sector to be coping with, let's hope that it's not happen, but then future emergency. And I know that for SPAFA, preparedness for emergency is one of the strong area of work, and I think this is really welcoming, especially at this time. For the long-term response, we really would like to see how culture can be used as the resources, as the culture-driven growth for the new development pathway. How can it be people-centered, place-based, and integrate policy making, and all is rooted in the culture of the place and its communities. We would like to really see the reshaping of understanding of culture. In the past, we really work in silo. We work, archaeologists work separately, performing arts artists work separately, living heritage practitioners work separately. And at the end of the day, we really see that there's many of the interconnected between these different domains of culture. And so how we look at culture as in a holistic view, especially many countries now start looking at culture from the creative economy perspective. And I think that would really be one of the solutions that we can look at as an opportunity to reset and rethink after the COVID. We have seen how culture has been promoted as a cross-cutting driver to achieve all the 17 SDG, and this requires a really strong intersectoral collaboration. And I think this could become a huge challenge, but then again, if we could overcome that, it could be a really great opportunity to bring culture into health, to bring culture into environmental issues, to bring culture into economic development. I think all this could be beneficial for the whole sector. I did touch upon digital and technology, and this one, of course, it provides a great opportunity. In reviewing and working with the culture sector, one of the biggest challenges is the lack of data. So recently, UNESCO has developed the Culture 2030 indicators to really provide a framework for countries to begin to collect the data on culture and how to prove that it can promote sustainable development, and how it can be also connected to the big data system so that it can provide for other resources, other development as well. So I think that would be a really a good opportunity for us to work on. And how we could reform the cultural governance, how to strengthen the role of culture public sector with adequate power and finance, but at the same time, I think it is a really also a good opportunity to think about the public-private partnerships and bringing with the focus on the local communities, and think about how local communities can really be the starting point and the grassroots of all the development that we would like to foresee in the culture sector. There has been a lot of skills that probably get a bit outdated because of COVID. It creates a lot of new problems. So now I think it's also a great opportunity for us to look at the cultural workforce, creative workforce, to recognize it properly and then to upskill the different skills that needed for the culture sector. And in this sense, I would just like to promote the competence framework for cultural heritage management that UNESCO Bangkok just got published. You could come to our website and have a look. That provides all the necessary skills, knowledge, and attitudes that would be needed for you to deal with different areas of culture sector in the coming years. And last but not least, we would like to see the development at the subnational level. We have seen many development plans, many strategies at the national level, but then many of you are working at the subnational level. And I think it would be a really important pioneers to connect all these dots, to bring all this cultural development at the local level so that it can be beneficial for the local communities and all our cultural stakeholders as well. So that is some of my views, and I would be happy to discuss that further in the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Han. Could I ask you to maybe leave a link of the
Yes, I certainly do so.
In the chat.
I will leave it in the chat. Yeah, thank you very much.
And also, I was struck by what you said about culture being a source of well-being. I think that's not emphasized enough, and that's something quite important, especially now. I was just hearing today about post-traumatic stress syndrome from COVID, and I think culture is a really important aspect on that. And I remember reading a study a few years ago about how visiting museums and heritage sites are actually beneficial for your health. And that's maybe something that's, small things, but small but effective as well.
Yeah, indeed. I think in Belgium now doctors can prescribe free museum visit for some of the patients who are facing difficulty mentally, whether it's COVID or not. So I wouldn't share all the links that perhaps would be useful for the audience in the chat.
Thank you. And so this is my clumsy segue of going to the museums and inviting Mr. Chai Visot to talk about his experience with the museums, particularly from the National Museum of Cambodia. Ms. Director Chai, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Noel, for your facilitation for this discussion. And hello, everybody. And in this regard, I would like to share with everybody with what we are doing at the National Museum of Cambodia. I prefer to focus only on the work that we are doing at the moment, as well as under the umbrella of the Department of the Museum, because I have two roles actually, as the director of the Museum Department and also the director of the National Museum of Cambodia. And that's why I just would like to share with you with what we are doing during the pandemic period in Cambodia. And during these 2 years, we are really frustrated with our work, because not many people are coming to work due to the fears of this COVID-19 spread into the city. And as a result, the government closed the capital city once during the COVID-19. And also we try to reopen the museum again and again, but finally the last of our period of closing of the museum since February, let's say end of February until the recent time, last month, let's say the 30th of November, that the government of Cambodia decided to reopen the museum and other places for the accessibility. And during this COVID-19, in contrast to other museums in the region and the world, that they are working so hard in order to create the content for approaching the audience through the online, or they are producing platforms of technologies in order to involve with the audience who are very boring at home, they keep themselves staying at home, something like that. And we are spending most of our times for the restoration work. As you heard already, as Noel introduced in the early stage, the National Museum of Cambodians, now it's about 100 years already, and that's why our structure need to be restored. So this is a good opportunity for us to spend these times in order to restore the roof of the National Museum of Cambodia, which we get a grant from the Royal Government of Cambodia. And this is what we are doing. And at the same time, we also thinking about the restoration, continue to restore or to conserve our object in the restoration. And we are also thinking about something to change in order to reach the level of the student to be ready, at least a part of our education development program. As I would like to inform that I was just appointed to be the director of the National Museum of Cambodia in these 2 years, especially during the COVID-19 time, since I was appointed and then everything is locked down. And so it's a very challenging task for me, but it also a good opportunity for me, to think about how should we develop the museum, be ready for the upcoming of the reopening of the museum. Even we cannot working much for the improvement, but we are trying our best with our limited budget and human resources. That what I want to give you, to share with you with another angle of the museum, contrast to the other museum that they are having their own enough finance or resources that they can cope or they can deal with the difficulty during the COVID-19. We are also trying our best in order to finding ways to deal with that too. And at the same time, we do not produce any, let's say, digital platforms by ourselves, but we are also working. We are working with the ASEAN Secretariat. As you might know, we have a project related to the ASEAN Digital Archives ACHDA project, and then we involved with this project in order to introduce some of our objects online through the ASEAN website. We host some of our objects with description, and then we also collaborate with the ASEAN Secretariat with a Japanese company in order to do the 3D or digitization process. But unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we cannot continue that project or to implement in Cambodia. And I just go to the other points regarding to the change of some museum. It is very important. Most during this COVID-19, we spend all our time for the physical improving, such as the roof, and also to strengthening the infrastructures of the wall of the museum, repaint, and the most important thing, we are trying to think about improving the exhibition room that we are displaying at the moment. And we try to repaint it and equip the light system in order to give the spotlight to the statue in our galleries. And then we are also working for improving the signage level of our museum too. And this is what we have done for our works. And then another difficult task for us is regarding to the staff management, and this is another difficulties task that we are doing, because we need to find ways in order to let them involved with the activity or with the work that they were assigned. It's very difficult task for this physical improvement, and then the staff development, staff transformation, or let's say management. It's not an easy task. And then in addition to what we are doing in the National Museum, we also get a small grant from the US Embassy in order to assist the provincial museum. We selected 6 provincial museum in order to implement this project. And we offered them the training regarding to the registration, and also offer them the platform of the database that they can register their collection into these kinds of database, because the main purpose that we are running this project, because we want the centralized collection at the National Museum in order to control the artifacts in the provinces. And this is the first stage that we are working with this project during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in another work, we are in another activity. We are working with the repatriation of the statues. As you might heard already, that the government of Cambodia is working so hard in order to demand other statues abroad. And it seems to be during this COVID-19, it is the suitable times that the government of Cambodia are trying to convince different museums and also private collectors in order to return the object back to Cambodia. As a result, we are working very close with the, as you might know from news already, that we are working with the case of Douglas Lutchworth, especially for the family of Douglas Lutchworth, in order to return some Cambodian objects that falsified or that in their private collection. So at the same time, we also working very close with the U.S. government in order to get other statues back home too, especially with the group, with the team of Homeland Security of the United States, and they are really supporting. And what we are doing, as in the same case with Thailand, we based on the agreement that we are signing with the U.S. and Cambodian. And this is very fruitful that we use that kind of legal framework in order to put pressure to the private donors and to the others collector or museums in order to hand over the museum, the collection Cambodian statue back to Cambodia. And on the other hand, as total that I received the statistic from my staff since 1996 up to 2021, we have around 798 objects were returned from abroad. And then now they are housing in the National Museum of Cambodia. And on the other hand, we are also working with levels of the Ministry of Culture and Fine Arts in order to promote Cambodians artifacts to abroad, or Cambodian culture to abroad, in terms of loaning the object to other country. And two cases that we are working at the moment during this COVID-19 related to our 101 object would be loaned for the mobile exhibition in the Europe, to United States, Europe, and also in Australia and New Zealand. And at the same time, we have another project very important regarding to the conservation of the large reclining statue, Vishnu reclining. It's a big a bronze statue that we are working with the museum, the Gime and the Louvre, in order to conserve and preserve that statue with the themes of deep research in order to find out the metal technique in the past during the Angkorian period. And that's why when we are starting to run this project, when it finished for the conservation, we also, the museum of Guinea will also loan another 125 objects to display in order to give to complete the stories about the techniques of metalwork in Angkorean periods. So this will be the big event of in the near futures. 20, or let's say 23 or 24, we're going to be started, and with this kind of project and another 2 museums in USA, Smithsonian and the Asian Arts Museum in San Francisco will continue to loan this large statue of bronze Vishnu statue to be displayed when finished the exhibition in Guinea in the following years, in 2025 or something like that. So at the same time, you might heard from the news regarding to the great exhibition with the Clevelands that we are working. We send our 8 statue for displaying with them too in recent times, and they use the technologies in order to implement it. And with these kinds of projects, we are thinking about the training or integrating the technologies into our artifacts after the finishing the exhibition in Cleveland. I'm sorry, because the time is running out. That's why I want to close my speech in this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Chai. I note that the National Museum of Cambodia is undergoing a time of regeneration, and I appreciate all the efforts that's being taken to restore the museum building, and also looking forward to the new exhibitions that are traveling around the world. And we hope that if we cannot visit Cambodia, we can have some of the exhibits come to us near soon.
Okay.
For our next panelist, may I invite Ajahn Rasami to talk about archaeology and education. Ajahn Rasami. I think you're still muted.
Already opened it though.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes,
can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Okay, okay. All right. Okay, I should turn it on. I would like to share with my slide. Just for a second. Okay. Just a second. Okay, let's see. So this is a few points that I would like to share with all of you. Okay, let's see. I would like to talk about during the pandemic and after the pandemic. It's when we reopening. What happened to the archaeology that as I working now. Okay, look at this. During the economic, that I would like to talk into like 2 topics, because when you teach in the university, you also have to do research, and also teaching. And the research itself, it's involved the heritage management as well. So what happened during the pandemic? Okay. Because of the government spent a lot of money for for the vaccine and to support the economy in our country. So in terms of the funding, we still get the funding. But what happened is we don't get the continual funding. Say, I used to receive the funding for 3-year research project. Now you get it year by year. So it's extremely hard if someone that work on the research, it's extremely hard to work and then to finish and then apply for the new research funding. So this is the kind of like the effect that we receive it, it's strong kind of like effect in our research. This is something. And also, during the time that we cannot get into the field, I do the research in northern Thailand, in Pansuwan, that near Burma. What happened is like, the community change. I think that what happened, I follow them up through their Facebook and, communicate through whoever I can communicate, because I cannot get into the site, the Chan have a strong belief in terms of, when there's a big pandemic, they closed their village. So almost 2 years that I cannot get into my research area. So for me, I get very frustrated, myself, that in terms of like, I cannot go to the field. And what happened is like, a lot of generation, the younger generation who work in the city, they go back home. And this will be, something that I will discuss about the reopening issue. So many of the younger generation return home. These people know something, from the urban kind of like lifestyle. And also there's a change of the leader, in the village that I'm working with. So that is also, affect the way that I will do research as well, because you need to establish your kind of like partnership again. You need to introduce yourself to the new people that you thought that you already know them. Now it's more younger generation who know the how to access the digital platform. And so this is during the pandemic, and also the landscape change. It's more quiet. A lot of people that I know is bankrupt, all of the small business. And also the site is deteriorating. So a lot of site, no one look at it, look at the artifacts or the site. So it's really in the bad condition. This is what I kind of like, whenever I have a chance, I ask people to take the picture for me. People are afraid of the outsider. This is a new thing that, we have to aware of that. And the whole almost 2 years, we simply do the library research, changing from doing the field research to the library research. A lot of methodology change. Okay, let's see. And how about the teaching? The positive impact, in terms of during the pandemic, I think it's great to have a webinar, online learning access, open access for the library that student can really kind of like, get into it. And more network, through the online access. We also see the more opportunity online activity with the local community. Local community, I question mark, because it's only some. But that is something that I think of, like, if I go back to the field again, what I would do is I like to involve them online again, because it's just preparation for the future, So a lot of people, the younger generation, know how to use the online platform, but the more older generation, they don't know. So I think that I have, I think of the opportunity that maybe in the future we change the communication. This is the way that we will do. But at the same time, I think that I get more involved with the international community during the pandemic. more than ever I ever thought of, like, that I would doing that, because of like, that is the best way that we can talk, share, because we cannot travel. This is something that happened. And also, we see the role of the online program, virtual museum conservation in the digital platform, because I also make the, series of the lecture online for my student. But the thing is, it's also hard because it means that you have to cram all of your lecture, like 12 lecture, into only 3 video. What your student will learn, but also, you have to trade off. What can you do? You cannot see them. So this is the positive impact that, I start with the positive first. And another thing that I see is the way that it's back to the nature and sufficient economy, because during the time that that we have early of the pandemic years, I talked to a lot of my students who live, in the rural area. They go back to their hometown, and they live sufficiently, but at the same time they study archaeology. So that they have time to really kind of like back into their hometown. So I think that is positive. And what I try to do is I also, try to encourage them to do archaeology in their hometown, instead of like, you choose the topic for the thesis to do something outside of your hometown. Now you have more time to really be in your hometown. So that is the positive impact that I see for my teaching, But the negative impact that I see is also a strong effect on the quality of the teaching and the learning, because you don't have the interaction, between student and professor. When you want to have a discussion, like right now, you want to have an open discussion, everyone can jump into each other, kind of like, and have a comment. You can't, because it have to be one by one. Otherwise you get, very messy in terms of like, online. So for about a year that we teaching online, I feel that the quality of my teaching is kind of like go down, and the learning experience of the student also down, because if they have to sit in front of the computer all day, I think that it's really stressful for them. And most importantly, study archaeology is the way that you have to go to the field. You have to take the student to the field, show them what it is, and it's hands-on and practice. They don't have that. Everything is online and video. Of course, at the beginning, it's fun, it's great because we can stay at home. But after a year, no one like it at all. And it's also its effect on the mentality of the student and professor, because I feel that I feel, especially the enter to the second year, I feel very stressful, because when you look at the exam that student answer to your question on archaeology, you feel that, well, there's no way that that it will be the same like when you be on site together. The reason the not only they don't have a hand on archaeology, but because they don't have access to the library resource. They have access, of course, I just told you about the positive impact. They have access to the international document or books or article, but not in Thai, very few. We don't make that online as much. So students don't read except use your lecture on that. So that is a strongly affect, my ability and my mentality in terms of as a professor. It's very, affect me on that. and still student 3 years, this 3 years student have no or less experience in the field and hand-on. How you be an archaeologist if you don't go to the field, or you have less experience. Now we try to, we just last month we took a student to the field first time, but it's also very dangerous because some of our students got the virus, so it affect the whole field. We have students over 100 students, so this is something that is for us is a major problem, and it's no way that if no matter you have a really great, digital or video platform for the student, still it is a big thing for our department. And another issue that I found that, to make the student want to be an archaeologist or work on the cultural heritage sector, you need to, give them an inspiration. They have to have an inspiration and passion, but they don't, because you know what? Because no or less interaction between student and professor. I still believe that in class, teaching is have a lot of potential that you can create a lot of good scholar, or archaeologist or curator. But this is, what happened is this is what I feel, maybe my personal kind of experience. And when I, this semester, it just started last week. I asked my third year student and second year student that who want to be an archaeologist or work in the heritage sector. Surprisingly, on my teaching experience for many decades, none of them, raised their hand and say that I want to be an archaeologist. None of them. And, so it means that the students are really discouraging to go on with the archaeology. And the reality is archaeology is not a profession that help them to survive in this kind of economic, pandemic situation. And we must admit that, this is and some year we used to get 50, and then we get 19, 20 students, then we get 60, and then so the number of the students that enter to our program is fluctuate. Before that, it's very stable, but now it's fluctuate. So it's some impact. The pandemic, really impact in terms of education in our university. I think that the other university in Southeast Asia might have the similar problem. So when it's reopening, what happened? As for me, I just came back from my field, research area. I have to admit that I have to relearning about the new member of the community, relearning, introduce myself to the new generation. The new generation that they learn from, from Bangkok or from the big city, they follow the digital platform. So they can follow up and they know what is going on in the world. So you have to rethinking about the way that how you communicate with them in terms of heritage protection and archaeological preservation. So I think that, I have to think of introducing the digital platform more to the local community. Most of the time, my workshop will be for the economic benefit, such as guide training or student curriculum development in the school. So now I think that I just have to prepare myself in terms of the new wave of the pandemic. I think that I will do the workshop on how to use the digital platform so I can communicate with them from the farther distance. This is the plan that I will think of after going to the site and see what is going on and see the availability of the internet access in that area. And I also, think of like how to find a new way of archaeology to contribute to the local economy. Because it's no tourists, no international tourists, but but local tourists, you still have some, and it's increased every day. So maybe, we have to, I myself have to think of like how to find a way, what to do to boosting the local economy, which is, I will show it to you later. I have to change my research methodology and research kind of like direction as well, just for temporary. And for the teaching, I have to find a new teaching innovation. I cannot teaching like 16 kind of lecture, I have to condense them and make the key and important kind of like important core kind of like, core area, just and give them a lot of experience and maybe exercise. But this is harder. I think that this is the way of teaching, harder than lecture. But it is important because otherwise you will not get people into the archaeology anymore, I just kind of like, it's really scary when my two class, second year and third year of my department, none of them raised their hand that they want to be an archaeologist. It just shocked me, so this is something surprised me a lot. So what happened, like I changed my research direction. Instead of continue working on the basic research, I use my research as a, tourist destination. I develop it and try to make a route, of the tourist kind of like, historical route for the heritage kind of like tourism. So basically, what I try to do is like, instead of like focus on basic research, I think that it's time for me also to really kind of like working with the local community to really generate their income by using the archaeology, the background that I know, archaeology, culture, aspect that I know about the area that I work. So I make I collect the team of the researcher that who will want to work with me, and then we work on the national and cultural heritage. So we are working on that, just 1 year research, just temporary. So at least we can help boosting the economy, and this can be the kind of like hand-on that the student can learn from this as well. And also the strategy, I'm sorry that this is very blur. I don't like this at all, but I have to use it. I start to use the Google Doc survey, because you cannot go to the field. You have to use the Google Doc survey. You ask people to answer, from the survey, those kind of things. And sometimes you use the telephone and you don't see people's face. When you don't see that, how can you, feel confidence about the result of your research? But I did that for the, for the part that we cannot go to the field at all. So the strategy, field strategy is kind of like flexible. You have to adapt and adjust yourself to the situation that what happened. And I have a series of lecture, on the class that I teach on the research methodology in archaeology. So I have to learn to kind of like, select the key point to inspire them. Just inspire them, not teaching them everything. Student center is something that, students have to work also with me in terms of, working on that, what they want to learn. The whole thing is changed for me as well. It's learning experience for me. So this is the kind of the situation that happened during the pandemic and reopening for me from the university, kind of like education. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn Rasmi, for your very insightful thoughts. I am reminded that there are students now who have gone through like 2 years of online learning, and they might possibly go through the entire undergraduate degree entirely online. And your thoughts are very confronting and also very useful for us to bear in mind. I'm also struck by what you've talked about, negotiating the online world and the offline world, and that's something that we at SPAFA have also been having trouble with trying, not trouble, but we also have to get used to trying to balance this offline and online world. And so on that note, I'd like to pass the floor to the Center Director of SEAMEO SPAFA, who will talk about her perspective on this question. Madam Director, please.
Thank you, Noel. And thank you for all the information I got from all of our speakers. When Noel asked me to be on the panels, I was thinking, we don't have archaeology physically, we don't have the cultural heritage. I mean, we do not look after all those, tangibly. However, I was thinking I will listen to all of our speakers, and thank you so much. I think I've got a wider information that will help SPAFA in the future. But what I want to say is that probably me personally, I look at the situation. We talk about the reopening of archaeology and cultural heritage. I think we do talk about this due to the problem that we get from COVID-19. But also, I look back even before COVID-19. I think all human beings, we are united in the proposing to work on a sustainable development. That's why United Nations has set up the Sustainable Development Goals. And all those goals are going towards how to make our planet, the people, human, living in a better way of life, and also how the environment will be improved. And all of that is to be healthy in this planet, and probably no poverty, everything that we talk about. Then the pandemic came. Everything stops, and it's kind of give us the picture of what if we don't do the sustainable development, what will happen? Because through the pandemic, I think we are facing everything that we talk about, that if we don't change, what will happen? This is kind of, in a way, having this pandemic show us some of the problems that might occur, but in a different process of thought. I am looking at this situation, trying to make it more optimistic that we're talking about change already. This is kind of force us to do it faster, quicker, and in a more systematically, if we can. We are in the process of going towards that goal. That's why we are having this new word, the new normal. And I think what every speaker has mentioned about is there are still a struggling of going towards that goal. Even Ajahn Resmi was mentioning about the teaching and mentality of students and of the teachers, professors. We both sides have to adjust on that process. Even like Noel was talking about SPAFA, we know that the course that can be done in 2 weeks, when it has to be online, we have to adjust it to many of weeks of presenting the teaching online. And that can be, how do you say, it's a burden for us, the teachers, and also the students who come to these training courses. And we have to evaluate whether the result is coming as good as it will be physically. And I was thinking of Ajahn Resmi when she mentioned about that archaeology needs hands-on practice. How can we do that? But at the end, I'm thinking that there must be ways. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think there must be ways. These are our journey of resilience, and we will be improving towards that practice. I don't know when can we do it efficiently, but we will go towards that way. I'm saying this because as SPAFA is the training center for archaeology and fine arts, I'm thinking that to go towards the new normal way efficiently, how can we do it? So I'm thinking that we have to go towards our contents on the training, listening to all of you that with all the problems that you have mentioned, how can we offer our training courses? How can we make the training courses more relevant and more, how do you say, innovative enough that it can replace the physical hands-on? How can it be possible to make the virtual site, the sites more real through virtual way of doing it? I was speaking to my colleagues the other day that probably through the journey of change, there might be some way of the transportation by some innovation that it could be that we can go to sites or museums quicker on a more safe transportation. I don't know, but this is something that I think as a training center, we are trying to adjust our courses and trying to see how can it be possible to change all the courses that we will offer in the future. You can see that during the pandemic time, we have the course on this disaster risk management, and we change from the physical way of training to an online system. It turned out that it takes about 4 months instead of 2 weeks of a training program. And we realized, like Ajahn Resmi was saying, that it seems that are we counting on the concentration of the participants to be as good as in the actual physical way of training. And also we have the bones conservation, archaeological bones conservation courses, which Dr. Noel has managed by presenting with the video training and trying to replace, not really replace, trying to make it more lively by not attending the site personally, but through the online video program. We try our best for our resilience with this situation. But I think that's why, because it's just the beginning, that's why we're talking about new normal. With new normal way of thinking, we think that this new normal will be practically, probably a normal in the future. So I'm thinking that with the reopening topic that we're talking about, we may have to look back at the experience that we learned from this pandemic and compare it with the change that we have done so far throughout many generations of human lives. We try to survive. So with that in mind, I think that the resiliency of this development will finally be achieved, our goal at the end. And probably it seems impossible at these hours, but I think we will be there. And like the way of teaching, it will be adjusted and finally adapted to a hybrid way, probably a hybrid way that how can we do it with physically and combined it with an online system, because I think we are forced in a way to develop to a more technology type of living, with the innovation, with the development of all the communication via a lot of internet and all of that. So we are in a way going towards that. This is just make us trying to improve that in a more systematic way and in a faster way. It's kind of force of nature. And I'm not saying that pandemic is a natural cause, but in a way, it's a disaster that's forced us to try to survive. I'm not saying that the reopening, I will say that the reopening is the door to a normal style of life in the future. It's just that we are still struggling at this hour. But I think there will be a way that we will go towards that, because it's not that we haven't talked about that. We talk about change for so long, but this is just a matter of how can we change? How can we improve? I think because I'm from a museum, I also think of the museum after the reopening. I was thinking that before we open, I also look at that there are many possible ways that you may have to think about physically and mentally about the visitor. I think we need to look at the structure of the architecture, because now that we are facing with social distancing, how can we adjust our structure of the architecture to be ready for the reopening, because we are still in the time of the pandemic. We don't know when will it go out. For example, we cannot have people line up for the ticketing anymore. We may have to think of online. Many museums has changed it to online tickets buying. And also, how can we change with the exhibition? How can we change the way people can visit each gallery of the collections? I'm not saying that I have any solution yet, but I think that those are something that we need to think about before we can really open the museum or the site, because when you are visiting the site, how can you make a course of visiting to be in, before we thinking of the danger if it's a remote area of the site, but now how can we help them to be safe from the pandemic? So I think there are many topics that each of us in archaeology and museums or culture, cultural heritage, to think of that as UNESCO, as a university, and researching. And for us, SPAFA, we think about it at different way of looking at the problems, referring to the responsibility of each institution. But I think altogether, when we talk about this and we combine it together, there will be ways that we can manage to succeed in our survival through this pandemic again. And also, like I mentioned before, that we were talking about the change through our sustainable development goals before, since 2015. And we aim to finish it, to complete that, to achieve that in 2030. So this is kind of a new challenge that in a way, think about it optimistically. It helps us to work together. Probably when you talk about poverty, you talk about peace, you talk about equality, in those goals, in the sustainable development goals. I think now every problem, every challenge that we're talking about, this, let's just say reopening, it urges us to find a way to complete with that sustainable development goals. And it's kind of urge everyone in the world to work together, collaborate more. And that's why I'm just thinking that we have many words from these sustainable development goals and all that. We talk about global citizenship, global citizen. So these are the problems from the pandemic that kind of stir everyone to face the same problem. So in a way, it might help us to achieve those sustainable development goals together in a more systematic way. 4, let me come back to the thoughts of SPAFA on this reopening. We are we have been facing already about the courses that Noel was mentioning, that we have to rearrange the course and everything. But through that, we learned that not just physically of the course, that we have to think what kind of courses, what topic that we should think of, but how can we involve the students or the trainees to be involved with the courses more, and how can we make it more efficient. So I think even though we have already planned our strategic plan for the next 5-year strategic plan, but it seems that even though we put our names of courses in our strategic plan, it might have to be that we will change it along the way to make the situation and the efficiency of our course to be more relevant to the needs and to the development of the problems that will will stay there as the new normal goal. And finally, we will be at the present normal, in a way, the normal lifestyle finally. So I don't know whether I'm talking about the topic clear enough, but I think everybody is going towards the same thing. How do we achieve the new normal situation effectively? And I think with all the collaboration from each other, like from UNESCO that you mentioned about every research that has been you already put up in the chat box, and with the problems sharing together by all of our speakers, I can see from different perspective of archaeology and cultural heritage. I think for us, SEAMEO SPAFA, I gather a lot of information, and I think it will be useful for us to develop the contents of our training courses. And also, I think from all of our speakers, I think we learn from each other the problems that you are facing. The looking at these problems with a thought of trying to solve the problem. I think everything is relevant for us to improve and to prepare for our reopening. And I was noting on my note that first we have to learn from the experience. Why do we wear masks? Why do we do those things? And probably this is, and then after you look at those experience, then you prepare all the risks that you might be facing, and then human attitude and behavior that's concerned for all the people at large, and also for the students, for the visitors to the museums or cultural sites. And then globalization, global collaboration, and probably with this thing in mind, we might be able to create a better creative resilience for the future normal life style after the end. I think that's my thought for now. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you, Center Director. And thank you to all our panelists for your thoughts this morning. We're supposed to have a discussion panel, but I think we're running out of time to have a full discussion. But everyone had something to share, and everyone had really important points to make. I thought of this as kind of like COVID was like a forest fire, and now we're in this. We had a giant catastrophe. Everyone's experienced it. Our friends at UNESCO and Ajahn Rasmi mentioned about how our particular industries have been affected. But we heard about how we are regenerating as well, from the examples of the National Museum. And this is a time for renewal, especially now. This is a very crucial time where we are rebuilding our systems, rebuilding our ways of collaborating, rebuilding our ways of teaching. And so that might be a good way to start this conference. We are now sowing seeds on learning our research, on sharing the archaeology and cultural heritage that we very much love. And so we hope that in the course of these 5 days, we can learn to relearn our archaeology, relearn our heritage, and find new connections within our region to rebuild. So with that, I would like to end our session for this morning. We'll take a 5-minute break before we start our next session at 12 noon Bangkok time, but it's just like 5 minutes from now.
How come we don't have a group photo?
All right, sure. Can we have a group photo, please?
Noel, can I say something just for 1 minute? Yeah.
Yes, Ajahn.
Yes, thank you so much for Ms. Han and Mr. Risot. I learned a great deal from what you just share with us, and Ajahn Somrak as well. And what I like to follow up is this is the SPAFACON is an appetizer for this year. Next year, we'll have a big conference that Indo-Pacific Prehistory, the 22nd of the Indo-Pacific Prehistory Conference in Chiang Mai, between the 6th to 12th of this November, next year. So we try very hard to manage the new normal meeting. But we hope that, this will be something. The appetizer will make you feel that, oh, I really want to see my colleague, in real for next year. So, I urge you and encourage all of you who haven't, really kind of like, register or, submit for the paper. Please take a look at the IPA, website. And we are all waiting for you and hope to see you next year. Thank you.
Yes, see you in Chiang Mai next year. All right, we'll take a group photo in 3, 2, 1, cheese. Done. Thank you very much to all my dear panelists. And we will be back in 4 minutes.
Thank you. Okay.